The tension in the Galactic Council chamber was thick enough to cut with a knife. Ambassador Lee Minho felt every pair of alien eyes boring into him as he stood at the center of the massive circular room. The chamber's crystalline walls pulsed with soft blue light, casting strange shadows across the faces of delegates from dozens of different worlds. The Vorthun delegate, her purple tentacles coiling and uncoiling with barely contained fury, slammed what passed for her hand on the marble podium. Her voice echoed through the translation devices, coming out in perfect but emotionless human speech. Ambassador Minho, your species has violated every treaty we've established. Human settlements are appearing in star systems that should take your primitive ships 50 years to reach. Yet somehow, your people arrive in months. How do you explain this impossible expansion? Minho kept his expression neutral, though his heart was racing. He had been asking himself the same question for weeks. Reports kept flooding in from across the galaxy about human colonies popping up in the most remote corners of space. The problem was, Earth's government had no idea how these people were getting there. Honored delegates, Minho began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I understand your concerns. Earth Command is conducting a full investigation into these incidents. We have no knowledge of any advanced technology that would allow such rapid travel. A chittering sound came from the insectoid klaxon representative. Perhaps your government lies to its own ambassadors, the creature suggested, its compound, eyes glittering with suspicion. I have served the Galactic Council for 15 years, Minho replied firmly. My record speaks for itself. Earth has always been transparent about our technological capabilities. The Andromedan delegate, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering force field, spoke next. Its voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Yet the evidence is undeniable. Human ships appear on our long-range sensors traveling at speeds that should be impossible for your species. Minho felt sweat beading on his forehead, despite the chamber's cool temperature. I can only repeat what Earth Command has told me. We are investigating these reports with the same urgency and confusion that you are experiencing. Meanwhile, thousands of light-years away in the Kepler belt, Salvage Captain Park Soo-jin was having what she thought would be just another routine day of asteroid mining. Her crew of 5 had been working this particular field for 3 weeks, breaking apart space rocks to harvest valuable minerals. The bridge of her ship, the Lucky Strike, was cramped but functional. Warning lights blinked softly as her navigation systems kept track of the floating debris around them. Soo-jin had been doing this job for 12 years, and she could read her instruments like a book. That's why the reading on her deep scan detector made her pause. Something was buried inside the largest asteroid in the field, something that definitely wasn't natural rock or metal ore. Jin, she called to her chief engineer, take a look at this scanner reading. What do you make of it? Jin floated over, in the low gravity, his magnetic boots clicking against the metal floor plates. He studied the display screen with a puzzled expression. Captain, this signature is massive. Whatever's in that rock, it's at least 300 meters long. Could be an old derelict ship, suggested Hana, their pilot. Lots of vessels get lost out here. Soo-jin shook her head. Not like this. Look at the power readings. This thing is still active. The crew exchanged nervous glances. Finding abandoned ships was common in their line of work, but discovering one that still had power after who knows how many years floating in space was something else entirely. Should we report it to the Salvage Authority? Asked Min, their youngest crew member. Let's take a closer look first, Soo-jin decided. Fire up the cutting beam. We're going in. The asteroid cracked open like an egg under their industrial laser. As the two halves drifted apart, Soo-jin felt her breath catch in her throat. There, gleaming in the harsh light of their work floods, was a ship unlike anything she had ever seen. The hull was smooth and curved, almost organic in its design. But what made Soo-jin's heart skip a beat were the symbols carved deep into the metal surface. She recognized them immediately as ancient Korean characters, the kind she had learned about in school when studying her cultural heritage. Captain, Jin whispered, those power readings are off the charts. This ship isn't just active, it's fully operational. The vessel was enormous, easily the size of a military cruiser, yet its design was completely foreign to anything in their databases. The metal seemed to shimmer with an inner light, as if the ship itself was somehow alive and breathing. Dr. Kim Ji-ho had been studying ancient artifacts for most of her adult life, but nothing had prepared her for what she was witnessing aboard the mysterious vessel. The archaeological team had been working carefully for hours, documenting every symbol and surface before attempting to access the ship's systems. The probe they inserted into what appeared to be a control panel was supposed to be completely passive, designed only to scan and record. But the moment it made contact with the alien technology, everything changed. The ship's corridors suddenly blazed with light. Ancient systems that had been dormant for countless years hummed to life with a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to pulse through the very bones of everyone aboard. Dr. Kim felt her hair stand on end as waves of energy rippled through the air around them. "What did we just do?" whispered Park Min-jae, her lead researcher, his face pale in the strange blue glow now emanating from the walls. "I don't know," Dr. Kim replied, her voice barely audible above the growing hum of awakening machinery. "But I think we just woke something up." What they couldn't see was that their actions had triggered a response that rippled across the entire galaxy. Hidden in the depths of space, camouflaged among asteroids, disguised as dead moons and buried within the cores of seemingly barren planets, ancient guardians began to stir from their long slumber. Captain Raxto, of the 3rd Hegemony Defense Fleet, was having what he thought would be a routine patrol when his ship's sensors began screaming warnings. His bridge crew, a mix of different alien species who had served together for years, had never seen their instruments behave like this. "Status report!" Raxto barked, his forearms working frantically at his command console. "Sir, the planetoid. We catalogued as P7749 is showing massive energy spikes," his tactical officer reported, her voice cracking with disbelief. "The readings are impossible. Nothing that size should be able to generate this much power." Through the main view screen, they watched in stunned silence as what they had always believed to be a lifeless chunk of rock began to change. The surface cracked and shifted, revealing metal underneath. Massive sections of the planetoid's crust fell away like an old shell, exposing the truth that had been hidden for millennia. It wasn't a planetoid at all. It was a warship, larger than anything in the known galaxy. The hull was covered in the same ancient symbols that Dr. Kim's team had discovered, but these glowed with an inner fire that made the darkness of space seem even more profound by comparison. "How long has that thing been there?" stammered the navigation officer, a young Cetian whose blue skin had turned almost white with fear. Captain Raxto had no answer. According to their stellar charts, that planetoid had been in the same orbit for over 10,000 years. Their ancestors had used it as a navigation marker. The thought that it had been a sleeping giant all this time made his blood run cold. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. On the rim worlds, mining operations ground to a halt as workers discovered that the asteroids they were breaking apart contained vast mechanical chambers. Deep space monitoring stations detected power, signatures coming from objects that had been classified as space debris for generations. The awakening wasn't random. Each ancient vessel that stirred to life did so with purpose, as if responding to some cosmic alarm clock that had finally reached its appointed hour. Communication arrays that had been silent for eons began broadcasting, coded signals to each other, creating a network that spanned star systems. Then came the transmission that changed everything. Every major government, every military command, and every diplomatic station in the galaxy received the same message, simultaneously. The signal was impossibly strong, cutting through jamming attempts and security protocols as if they didn't exist. The voice that spoke was unmistakably human, but it carried an accent and tone that no living person recognized. It spoke in perfect galactic standard, the universal language of trade and diplomacy. Yet there was something ancient about it, something that suggested the speaker had learned the language long before most species had even discovered space travel. "I am Admiral Joe Wansick of the First Watch," the voice announced with quiet authority. "Our exile ends today." The message lasted only seconds, but its impact was immediate and profound. Emergency sessions were called in every capital city across the galaxy. Military fleets were mobilized, though no one was sure whether to prepare for war or diplomacy. Back on the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Minho felt his personal communicator buzz with an incoming message. The device was encrypted with codes that only a handful of people in the galaxy possessed. When he read the message, his hands began to tremble. "The sleepers wake. Come home, brother." The message was signed with a name he recognized, though he hadn't seen it in over 20 years. It was his older brother, Lee Minwoo, who had disappeared during a deep space exploration mission when Minho was still a young diplomatic attaché. The massive Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. Every delegate, from the smallest insectoid representative to the towering crystal beings from the outer rim, sat in stunned silence as the holographic image stabilized before them. Admiral Cho Won-sik appeared as clearly as if he were standing in the room, though everyone knew he was transmitting from somewhere deep in space. His appearance was unmistakably human, but everything else about him was wrong in ways that made the assembled delegates uncomfortable. His uniform was unlike anything Earth's military had ever produced. The fabric seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, while symbols moved across its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Behind him, through the transparent walls of his ship's bridge, they could see technology that made their most advanced systems look like children's toys. The bridge crew visible in the background moved with the precision of people who had been working together for decades, perhaps centuries. Their equipment hummed with power that the Council's sensors couldn't even properly measure. "Honored delegates of the Galactic Council," Admiral Cho began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You have known humanity as a young species, eager to explore and expand among the stars, but that is only part of the truth." Ambassador Minho felt his world shifting beneath his feet. Everything he thought he knew about human history was crumbling as he watched this stranger claim to speak for all of humanity. "We are not Earth's children who learn to reach for the stars," Cho continued, his eyes scanning the chamber as if he could see each delegate personally. "We are humanity's true origin. Earth was merely one seed among thousands, planted across the galaxy when we retreated into the deep void eons ago." The Vorthan delegate's tentacles writhed in distress. "Impossible. Our records show humans appearing in this sector only recently. Your species barely mastered faster-than-light travel a century ago." Admiral Cho smiled, and there was something ancient in that expression. "Your records show what we allowed you to see. The Watchers have been maintaining the ancient fleets, while our scattered children on worlds like Earth slowly rediscovered their heritage." He gestured, and the holographic display expanded to show star charts that none of the delegates recognized. Thousands of systems were marked with symbols that pulsed with soft light. Every world where humanity has appeared, every colony that seems to have grown overnight, every ship that travels faster than your science says is possible. They are all part of the same network that has existed since before most of your civilizations learned to make fire, the Andromedan energy being flickered with agitation. "You speak of deception on a galactic scale. Why reveal yourselves now?" "Because," Cho replied simply, "our scattered children have finally grown strong enough to reclaim their birthright. Earth's humanity has reached the stars on their own merit. They have proven themselves worthy of rejoining the greater family." Far from the council chamber, in a space that existed between the normal dimensions of reality, Commander Yoon Ha-young watched the proceedings through sensors that could peer across the galaxy. Her command station was a marvel of engineering that seemed to exist in several places at once, its walls showing views of star systems that were light years apart. Around her, thousands of ships hung in the dimensional void. Each vessel was older than most of the civilizations represented in the Galactic Council. Their crews descended from humanity's first starfarers. These were people whose ancestors had left Earth when it was still covered in ice, who had watched empires rise and fall across the galaxy while maintaining their eternal vigil. "Phase 1 is complete," reported her tactical officer, a woman whose family had been serving aboard these ships for over 2,000 years. "All hidden fleets have revealed themselves. The Council species are beginning to understand the scope of our presence." Yoon nodded, her fingers dancing across controls that manipulated reality itself. "Good. But they still don't understand why we've been hiding for so long. They think this is about conquest or expansion." Through her sensors, she could see the fear growing in the council chamber. The alien delegates were beginning to realize that humanity wasn't the young, naive species they had thought. Instead, they were face to face with something far older and more powerful than they had ever imagined. "Begin Phase 2, Yoon ordered quietly, her voice carrying to every ship in the hidden fleet. It's time they saw what we've been guarding against. The dimensional barriers around her command station began to shift, allowing glimpses of something vast and dark moving in the spaces between stars. Ancient enemies that had been held at bay for millennia by the Watchers were stirring, drawn by the energy signatures of the awakening fleets. Back in the council chamber, Admiral Cho's expression grew serious. "You wonder why we hid ourselves for so long, why we allowed you to believe humans were newcomers to the galactic community. The answer is simple. We have been standing guard against something that would destroy everything you have built." Tante Herm. Holographic display changed again, showing regions of space that seemed to writhe with darkness. "The Devourers have been contained for 10,000 years, held back by our fleets and our vigilance. But our exile is ending, and soon you will understand why humanity's children were scattered across the galaxy in the first place." The warning sirens that echoed through the combined fleet command ship were unlike anything Captain Naleth had heard in her 30 years of military service. These weren't the measured tones of a standard alert, but the desperate wailing of systems pushed beyond their limits by something that shouldn't exist. Her bridge crew, veterans of countless battles against pirates and territorial disputes, moved with barely controlled panic as their sensors tried to make sense of what was approaching. The main view screen showed space itself seeming to twist and writhe, as if reality was being digested by something hungry and alive. "Report!" Nalath barked, her scaled hands gripping the command chair as the ship shuddered around them. "Captain, we're detecting massive spatial distortions across 17 star systems," her science officer replied, his voice cracking with disbelief. "Whatever's causing this is consuming entire planets. The Kepler system just went completely dark." The Void Swarm had arrived exactly as Admiral Cho had predicted. It wasn't an invasion in any conventional sense. It was more like a cosmic infection, a plague of living darkness that consumed everything in its path. Stars were snuffed out like candles, planets dissolved into nothingness, and the very fabric of space seemed to rot wherever the enemy touched it. "Our weapons barely scratched them," Nalath reported through the fleet communication network, watching helplessly as her most powerful plasma cannons passed harmlessly through the writhing darkness. "Standard energy weapons have no effect. Kinetic rounds disappear completely." Similar reports flooded in from across the combined fleet. The greatest military force the galaxy had ever assembled, representing dozens of species and thousands of years of technological advancement, was being swept aside like dust before a hurricane. That's when the ancient human fleet revealed what they had truly been designed for. Admiral Cho's flagship, the Eternal Vigil, moved forward through the chaos with a grace that defied physics. The massive vessel seemed to slide between dimensions, appearing and disappearing as it approached the heart of the Void Swarm. When it finally unleashed its weapons, the effect was beyond anything the watching aliens had ever witnessed. Space itself seemed to fold and twist around the ancient ship's guns. Reality bent like heated metal as weapons that had been perfected over 10 millennia of preparation tore into the enemy. The living darkness that had shrugged off every other attack suddenly recoiled, sections of it simply ceasing to exist, as the Watcher technology found its mark. Captain Park Soo-jin, now commanding a retrofitted ancient destroyer called the Silent Thunder, watched the battle unfold from her position in the second wave. Her crew of former salvagers had volunteered to join the fight when they learned what was at stake, and now they found themselves at the controls of a warship older than most civilizations. "These aren't just warships," she breathed into her communication headset, watching as the Watcher fleet moved with perfect coordination through the battle. They're specialized tools, designed for fighting this specific enemy. Every system on her ancient ship had been built with one purpose in mind: to combat the Void Swarm. The weapons didn't just fire energy or projectiles, they fired concepts, ideas made manifest that could damage beings that existed partially outside normal reality. The shields didn't just deflect attacks, They reinforced the local fabric of space-time to prevent the reality-eating enemy from simply dissolving her. Ship, Lieutenant Han Giwu found himself in the unique position of coordinating between the Watcher fleet and the alien forces. His training at Earth's military academy had never covered anything like this, but somehow the ancient tactical systems seemed to respond to his thoughts as much as his commands. "Listen carefully," he explained to the alien commanders over the fleet communication network, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "The Watchers have been preparing for this moment for 10,000 years. Every ship in their fleet, every weapon they carry, every tactic they use, it's all been designed specifically for this battle." The difference was immediately apparent. Where the combined fleet's attacks had been useless, the Watcher weapons carved through the enemy like a hot knife through ice. Ancient human ships moved through the void swarm with purpose, their crews fighting with the precision of people who had trained for this single moment across countless generations. The tide of battle began to turn as humanity's true inheritance was unleashed. These weren't just advanced weapons or superior technology. They were the culmination of 10 millennia of focused preparation. Every battle tactic had been refined through centuries of simulation and planning. Every weapon had been tested and perfected against captured samples of the enemy. The alien crews watched in amazement as the human ships seemed to dance through the chaos, their movements perfectly coordinated despite being spread across multiple star systems. It was as if they were all part of a single organism, responding to threats and opportunities within human precision. "How is this possible?" Captain Nalath asked, watching as a formation of Watcher destroyers executed a maneuver that should have been impossible, appearing behind the enemy through what looked like a fold in space itself. "They've been fighting this war for 10,000 years, Han Giwu replied simply. "We're just seeing the final battle." The void swarm, which had seemed unstoppable just hours before, began to retreat for the first time in recorded history. The living darkness pulled back from star system after star system, leaving behind empty space where planets and stars slowly began to reappear as reality reasserted itself. The aftermath of the battle left scars across space itself. Where the void swarm had passed, reality looked different, twisted in ways that would take centuries to fully heal. But the living darkness was retreating, pulling back through the gaps between galaxies like a wounded animal, seeking shelter in the deepest caves. Admiral Cho watched the enemy's withdrawal from the bridge of the eternal vigil, his ancient eyes reflecting the strange light of healing space. His crew worked quietly around him, monitoring the retreat with instruments that could track the swarm across dimensional barriers. This wasn't the first time they had driven back the enemy, and it wouldn't be the last. "Status report," he requested, though his tone was calmer now than it had been during the heat of battle. "The swarm has retreated beyond the galactic rim," his tactical officer reported. "Long-range sensors show them moving toward the void between galaxy clusters. They're following the same pattern as their last withdrawal." Cho nodded grimly. The void swarm was as predictable as it was dangerous. It would spend the next few thousand years regrouping in the empty spaces between galaxies, growing stronger and more numerous, until it felt ready to attempt another invasion. It was a cycle that had repeated itself for millions of years. The Galactic Council chamber was a different place when Admiral Cho materialized before them again. Gone was the suspicious tension that had filled the air during their first meeting. The alien delegates looked at him with something approaching reverence, now having witnessed firsthand what humanity's ancient guardians were capable of. "Honored Admiral," the Vorthan delegate began, her tentacles moving in gestures of respect, "we owe you an apology. We doubted your people's intentions when we should have been grateful for your protection." Cho raised a hand to silence her. "No. Apologies are necessary. We chose to remain hidden, to let you believe humans were newcomers to the galaxy. The deception was ours, not yours." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from dozens of worlds. "But now you know the truth. The void swarm will return as it always does. The cycle has repeated itself for longer than your oldest civilizations have existed. Next time, we can face it together, or we can fall together." The silence that followed was thoughtful rather than fearful. These leaders had seen what united action could accomplish when the ancient human fleet fought alongside their own forces. They had witnessed the power of cooperation between species that had never imagined they could work together. "What do you propose?" asked the Andromedan delegate, its energy form pulsing with curiosity. "Partnership," Cho replied simply. "We share our knowledge, our technology, our experience. In return, you help us prepare for the next cycle. Together, we build a galaxy that can stand against the darkness." Meanwhile, Captain Park Soo-jin was discovering just how dramatically her life had changed. One day she had been a simple salvage operator, breaking apart asteroids for scrap metal, and now she found herself promoted to fleet commander, overseeing the integration of Watcher technology with modern vessels. The shipyard orbiting Kepler station was a marvel of cooperation. Human engineers who had awakened from centuries of sleep worked alongside alien technicians to retrofit modern ships with ancient weapons. The sight of Cetian mechanics learning to calibrate reality-bending cannons from humans whose grandparents had been born in the depths of space filled her with an unexpected sense of hope. "Commander Park," called out Chief Engineer Bae Jisoo, floating over in the low-gravity environment, "the Hegemony cruiser is ready for its first test firing. The crew says they can actually feel the difference in their ship's capabilities." Soo-jin smiled as she watched a mixed crew of humans and aliens work together on the bridge of a vessel that combined the best of both ancient and modern technology. These weren't just upgraded weapons systems, they were symbols of a new era of cooperation. Ambassador Minho felt a deep sense of satisfaction as he placed his signature on the new Galactic Charter. The document in his hands represented more than just a treaty. It was a fundamental shift in how the galaxy viewed itself and its place in the universe. Article 7, he read aloud to the assembled delegates, establishes the Galactic Defense Network, combining Watcher technology and expertise with the resources and personnel of all member species. Humanity was no longer the newcomer species, seeking acceptance at the galactic table. They were recognized as the galaxy's ancient guardians, finally home after 10,000 years of exile. But more importantly, they were no longer alone in their eternal vigil. Deep in the dimensional void between realities, Commander Yoon Ha-young monitored her instruments with quiet satisfaction. Her network of monitoring stations, hidden throughout the galaxy, was already detecting the first stirrings of new threats. Other enemies moved in the dark spaces beyond the galactic rim, drawn by the energy signatures of the recent battle. But this time, the Watchers wouldn't face these threats alone. The charter that Ambassador Minho had just signed meant that every species in the galaxy would contribute to the defense network. Ships were already being retrofitted with Watcher technology. Crews were being trained in ancient tactics, and new monitoring stations were being established in star systems that had never known such protection. "Begin the next phase of integration," Yoon ordered her staff. "Expand the sensor network to include all member worlds, train their best officers in deep void tactics, and prepare the civilian populations for what they might face." The sleeping giants had awakened, but they had awakened into a galaxy that was ready to stand with them. The Watch continued, stronger than ever, with partners who understood that some threats were too great for any single species to face alone. As the lights of 1,000,000,000,000 stars shone across the galaxy, humanity's ancient guardians took their place not as conquerors or overlords, but as teachers and protectors, in a universe that would never be the same again.